Who here has never been to a birthday party before? This is a safe space, so it's okay if you've never been to a birthday party. It's really important for this next exercise that you pair with somebody who has. Okay, is that cool? Has anybody here ever done improvisational comedic stage work? Oh, good, nobody. Then you'll all be uncomfortable for the next exercise. So what I'd like you guys to do, I'm gonna pair you up, hopefully with somebody you don't know or haven't worked with. So you'll get to introduce yourself really quickly to somebody. And what I want you guys to do is improvisationally plan a birthday party together. Okay, so for example, can you please pitch a birthday party concept to me?
Lots of cats.
Lots of cats, okay. So the suggestion is lots of cats. Okay, and my job is to say yes, but, and then anything I want to after that. So I can say, yes, but I'm a dog person. And then you say, yes, but, and then anything you want to say after that. Okay?
How does it work again?
So yes, but, and then something else.
You can say no.
Yes, you can't say no. You can say yes, comma, but. Do you guys understand?
Continually.
Continually, back and
yes.
forth. That is anything you say, yes, but, I'm a dog person, and you say, yes, but.
Yes, but the whole idea is just please me.
Sorry,
yes,
say that.
But the whole idea is just to please me.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So you got, yes, but, who will come to a party that's just for you,
Yeah.
right? And then you say, yes, but it's my birthday, so fuck you. Yes.
Awesome.
Does it actually bother anybody if I curse? No. All right, go fuck yourselves if it does. Because that's how I roll. Okay, so this is just, it makes me feel more comfortable, so I hope it makes you all feel comfortable too. I hope so. It's actually funny. I teach a lot of workshops back in New York, and this one woman came up to me during the break, and she was like, thank you for cursing. I have mild ADHD, and it actually really helps me focus. So every time I say like fuck or shit, she's like, oh, right, wakes you up. Okay, so everybody stand up and grab a partner. Introduce yourself really quickly. I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes. Classic 3-way Venn diagram. You need to balance the voices of any product you're building. The voice of people, users, technology, and money, right? So what's something that is good for people and potentially financially feasible but technologically infeasible? What's something that's just good for people and potentially profitable but is impossible technologically? Time travel, yes, time travel is a good example. If you could build a time traveling device, you could sell it for a fuck ton of money, probably. We don't know how to make one, so regardless of how much people want it and how much you can charge for it, if you do a Kickstarter for a time machine, you will probably eventually get arrested. So that's not good. And similarly, if something's great for people and technologically feasible but financially insupportable, what do you call that? What's that? Any examples of that? Rocket science. That's, well, yeah, going to space is very expensive. It's very true. It's technologically feasible. We can't all afford to go there yet, right? It's also, I often call it a pipe dream. It's like, oh, it'd be so great, but nobody's willing to actually take money out of their pocket and put it down, right? You need all 3. And so sometimes in user experience design, people are like, oh, the user first, user first, user first. Totally important. Notice people is not at the top, right? Neither one of these is more important. You need to have all 3. You need to have something that people are willing to pay for, something that people love and want, and something that is technologically feasible. This is not rocket science. This is common sense. But it's really hard to do it because there's a CFO, there's a CTO, there's no CUO in most organizations. There's rarely a chief user officer, right, whose job is like head of product is not the same thing as like, head of user, right? And it's really important to make sure you have somebody to advocate for that. And the best way, a lot of people say like, oh, we know our users, right? We have a good idea of who they are, right? But most people don't go out and actually talk to their users. So it's really important to talk to users. There are 4 principles of listening to your users. One is to ask open-ended questions. Can anybody give me an example of an open-ended question? Yeah, how are you today? Exactly. It's like, how are you today versus you're fine today, right? Or are you feeling good or bad today, right? That's a closed question, right? That's a question that somebody can answer with a yes or no. Asking an open-ended question, talk to me about how you're feeling today. That's a super open-ended question. If you're talking to users, you're listening. You're only talking 10% of the time. Using silence. It's one of the biggest crutches when you're doing user research to ask a question and then get uncomfortable with the silence and then backfill with another question. So what I mean is this, this, and this. Ask the question, shut the fuck up, let them talk. And when they say something, don't go on to your next question. Say, hey, is there anything else about that you'd like to tell me? Or push for a story. Say, oh, well, tell me about the last time you did that. Can you give me a specific example of that? And not in an accusatory way. It's like, oh, that's really interesting. Can you tell me more? Right? Because you can just go way down the rabbit hole with just one thing. So I think it's like talking to users is like a conversation arc. If you go to a party and you don't like somebody immediately, that's happened to most of us, right? You know, or a bad first date where you're just like, I don't like you at all, right? And that's because there's a mismatch of energy and expectation, right? If you meet somebody and you're like, hey, nice to meet you, and they're like, oh my God, we're best friends, and they like hug you, and you're just like, who the fuck are you, right? You need to start off slow. I have a laser pointer here. It's green. Don't look at that. It'll burn your eyes. So you increase your energy and the intensity and the relationship between your user over time by asking general rapport questions and then having more specific research questions. The most important question to ask somebody at the end of your research is there anything else I should know? Is there something I missed, right? So we're going to you're going to interview each other right now.
We're going to do an activity.
We're going to do an
And
activity.
you're going to find out from your partner how they like their coffee, or if they're not coffee drinkers, how they like their tea. So pair up, probably with the person next to you, and find out and ask. Remember the principles of asking open-ended questions. So don't ask them, do you like coffee? It's like, what type of coffee do you like? Or what type of tea do you like? Open-ended questions, use silence, talk 10% of the time, and try and find out what their coffee morning routine is like as
Yes.
much as possible.
The best practices are right here.
Yes.
We're putting you on the spot. You need to start now. Question, because
Yeah.
when you do user research, you sometimes have people where it's like pulling teeth, and it's really hard.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you wonder, am I just designing for extroverts, right? So you need to, we didn't give you any time to plan. Like, we didn't plan the research. We didn't give you like a series of questions to ask. But you need to find the right prompts that will get something out of somebody. And you also have a hypothesis you're testing or various experiences that you're trying to investigate. So you'll have more than, in a way what we're doing is prototyping research. You'll begin to understand what questions will work and which questions won't.
Yep.
I'm going to kick forward if that's
yeah,
cool.
for sure. Let's go.
At this point, you should have a sense of like what type of person you're talking to. And we now, if we were like a coffee design company, we could say, okay, maybe there are people who are obsessed versus unobsessed. People who are messy and people who are highly organized, people who clean and polish everything. And we could begin to understand what are the spectrums of people that we're working with. We can take the stories and turn them into archetypes, right? It's really important to go out and talk to more than one person. If you start talking to about 8 or 9 people, you'll start to hear and see the same things. The 9th interview will be boring because you'll be like, oh my God, I know somebody just like this person, right? And then the 10th interview, you're like, oh my God, I actually know all the types of people in the coffee world. So if you actually go out and talk to 10 people, you will begin to understand who are the types of people you're dealing with. I think that one of the most important things is to speak user. Okay, so there's 5 ways to organize information. Do you guys know about TED Talks? Okay,
Yep.
so Richard Saul Wurman came up with Latch. These are the 5 ways he has to organize things: location, alphabetical, time, category, and hierarchy. I'm sure we've all had the experience of going into a drugstore or a supermarket, and the very first thing you do is find someone who works there to ask them where something is. Because they use a system of organization that has nothing to do with your own category of experience. Where are the tweezers? I don't know. They're near the Q-tips, apparently. They're near the toenail clippers. How often do I buy toenail? Like, I don't know where these things are. They know exactly where everything is. You go and you say, where are the carrots? They're like, aisle 4 in the back on the right. You're like, whew. Right? They're using location and categories that have nothing to do with ours. And it's really important to know your users' categories of experience. So I'll give you an example. Location, right? It's in the front, it's in the back. Alphabetical is pretty straightforward, right? Time, earliest to latest. Category. If we're organizing our music collections, category is rock versus blues versus rap versus disco, which is hard to organize. Hierarchy, good to bad. These are very subjective measures. So let's talk about time. Has anybody seen the movie High Fidelity? Yes, it's an awesome movie. There's a scene where John Cusack is reorganizing his record collection, and one of his coworkers sees all of his records all over the floor, and he's like, wow, how are you what are you doing? How are you organizing your records? Like, are you doing it alphabetically? Because that's pretty boring, right? And also the section is really big usually, because there's the Beatles, the Who, the Kinks. It's really hard to find the thes, right? And he's like, no. He's like, oh, you're doing it by category. And it's really hard, because blues to soul, like that's a pretty fine line. It's really hard to, like, if I'm looking for a soul record, maybe it's in the blues section, I don't know. And he's like, no, I'm organizing it autobiographically. He was organizing his records by when he was introduced to the records. And so that's the difference between, in universal time, the Jackson 5 comes before Michael Jackson, right? Everyone knows this. Yeah. This is universally true. But this is a fact,
He did not
right?
reverse
But for
age.
me, maybe I was introduced to Jackson, to Thriller, and then I was like, Michael Jackson's the best. He has other albums? Oh my God. And I go back into his back catalog and I discover the Jackson 5, and it's amazing. And so if I'm organizing my records autobiographically, Thriller comes before Jackson 5. And if you're talking to your users, it doesn't matter that Jackson 5 came before Thriller. It doesn't matter that there's an objective way of organizing the information. You need to know your user's way of organizing the information. And that's what you need to find out. So,
All right, activity time. So we are going to try and find out what kind of person or user that you're trying to interview with, and try and find out what is their latch. So how do they personally think about coffee? The very same thing that we were just talking about before. And not something universal, something that's personalized to them. So whether they arrange their coffee in a certain way, whether they take it at a certain time, or whether it's a certain way that they think about coffee beans. I don't know, but why don't you take a moment, think about it, and then turn to your partner next to you. We'll put 2 minutes on the clock.
now we're swapping roles now.
And we're swapping roles. Remember interviewing best practices, open-ended questions, use silence, talk 10% of the time, and wait
And
when
ask
you use
for
silence.
specific stories.
Specific stories.
So this is what's really amazing about this process of talking to a bunch of users, is that you begin to harness and gather all these stories, which will help you begin to understand who are the people in my neighborhood, right? Of the people I'm going to serve, the people I can never get. Who are my easy wins? Who's that next tier of people? There's people who only drink when they're tired. There's people who only drink at home versus work. If some of you went to Cesari's workshop yesterday or the day before, he talked about moments that a product can be thought of or used by a person. This is when you can begin to actually figure out when are people most susceptible or open to your product or your messaging, right? If you're in the coffee business and you're like, oh my God, there's nobody who's owning nighttime coffee. Crazy, right? Maybe there's like evening coffee. Like that's something that nobody's done before.
Yeah.
And if you have deep knowledge about the coffee business, maybe there's an opportunity for you to innovate in that space, and at least understand that there are people who are open to that. When you talk about speaking user and using the terms your user really that means something to your user, it's like going into a supermarket and being able to find something versus not being able to find something. Are you guys familiar with lynda.com? So they're an online education resource. A couple of years ago, a friend of mine did a big user research study with them, and what they discovered was that there were these two fundamental approaches to education. There's people who want to be something and people who want to learn how to do something. And there was a huge spectrum that mattered a lot to them. Whoa, sorry about that. People who wanted to be something, it's like, I want to be a graphic designer. I don't know anything about graphic design, but I need to come to lynda.com and I need to be handheld all the way through this process There's dozens of things you need to learn if you want to be a graphic designer, if you're an accountant, right? But if you are a graphic designer already and you just want to know what Adobe 6 or 7 does, there's just one thing you want to learn how to do. How do I deal with layers, right? How do I handle this new animation feature? And they decided to organize their homepage with these two main user perceptions. Instead of having just a cacophony of goals, they just focused on these two main pathways through all of their content. And that's why understanding your users' latch is important, because then you can serve up the right products to them. You can bring them down the right pathway. And so I think that's why it's important to know what the key goals of your user are, right? What do they want to do? How do you get them from feeling meh to happy, right? What is the process by which you actually produce the emotional transformation that your user wants? So with coffee, somebody drinks it because they're tired. They want to be awake. Somebody goes to lynda.com because they're uninformed and they want to be informed. They want mastery, or they just want to be brought up to speed. Those are two really different goals. And you need to understand those goals and begin to map them out for yourself. I think there's often a real confusion between a business goal, something I want something I want somebody to do, versus what people actually want to do. So do we have some loose leaf paper, by the way? Is there some? I forgot to check on that. Did you guys? Yeah, we need that like 5 minutes ago. Sorry. Does everyone have a mobile phone with them? That's not
Yes.
surprising. That's good.
Yeah.
I want you guys to take a look at your phone. This is like the one time when it's okay to look at your phone while I'm talking.
Yep.
And I want you to think about the app that you use the most. Right? This may be one flow. This is one thing I do. This may be another thing I do. Key flows are the things, there's reading, there's checking in, there's clearing out my messages. And sketching all of these different flows is a way to begin to understand all of the components of the system, right? But it's really important to step out and take the 10,000-foot view and understand how do all the flows connect. What's the wiring diagram? Okay, I'm a big fan. My wireframe, which is not a lot anymore, when I used to do user experience design all the time, I wireframe in Illustrator, because I went to design school and that's what they teach you. But what I love about Illustrator is that I can zoom in on a screen and then zoom out and see all of my screens and see how they all connect. Because then I begin to understand, not just from a user's perspective, but from a system perspective, does this make sense? Does everything fit together? Is it hard to get from one place to another? Right? You need to take a step back and say, how do these flows connect? And what are the primary flows versus the secondary flows? Okay, a primary flow is the thing that the user gets the most juice out of, or the thing that helps you make the most money. Right? What's the primary flow on Instagram? Taking a picture, right? Applying a filter and posting it. Liking, tagging, those are all secondary. Instagram would still work pretty well without it. Facebook, what are the primary flows in Facebook? Scroll, 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 scroll. Liking, tagging is actually super essential. Posting, right? And so these are all the different components. We need to understand how all the components fit together.
Just to jump in very quickly, an analogy that I really like when you think about system maps is, as a kid, did any of you read like those adventure books? When you read one chapter, and at the end of the chapter you get to pick your own adventure, and like turn to page 7 if you want to explore this land, or turn to page 30 if you want to encounter the dragon. And that's like a perfect example of like, if you look at this chart diagram of like, you get to pick your choose your own adventure. And if you're someone who's the designer of this ultimate world that you're building, you need to be very clear on what is the end goal. Is your end goal that, for Instagram, that the main primary flow is all about posting the picture, sharing with friends, and that's it. And maybe the secondary one is small likes and shares, like on other social media channels, so it's not as prominent. But it's important to separate those flows out.
Yeah, they're connected.
They're
But you
connected.
need to understand how you need to think about them separately. I think it's sometimes overwhelming to think about all the states of the system.
Yep.
The flows are really the molecules
Yep.
of the user experience. We need to separate those out.
It's like playing Super Mario Bros. And like, totally like dating myself and what stuff I'm into. But at the end of the day, like the primary flow is you gotta rescue the princess.
Yeah.
And you can go on all of these like little side adventures, but then at the end of the day, like what you wanna do is rescue the princess.
Right. Don't fuck that up.
Don't.
Right? That's the soul. No, it's true.
Yeah.
That's the soul of the thing.
That
Like,
is the soul.
if you add 1 million features to Instagram such that it's hard to do the primary flow, and
Yeah.
you've broken it.
Yeah.
Right? Don't break the primary flow. The primary flow is that if you broke it, it's no longer good. It's no longer fun. You've ripped the soul out of the experience. Yeah.
I'm just curious, do you have an example in mind of a really great app that was broken because of that?
That's a pretty subjective question. I think for some people, like we were talking about Foursquare the other day,
Yes.
and it's interesting because they didn't break the primary flow, but they still messed with people's mental model. Do you guys use Foursquare much here? Okay, so what's that last? Yeah, it was like a really hot trend in New York
Yeah.
for the last like 4 years, and checking in mattered a lot. Like a big amount, like totally a
Yeah,
lot.
so it's sort of like, so Foursquare is basically, when you arrive in a place, you check into the place and you collect badges, maybe you get like a promotion or a free discount. But then the Foursquare people decided that, no, that's not the point of the Foursquare app. We're
Yeah.
gonna split it off and make a new app called Swarm, where you can only check in on Swarm, and on Foursquare, the primary flow is going to be checking out, kind of like Yelp, like where can I go to eat, or where can I go to hang out, or like discover new bars. So they've totally shifted the primary flow to a new app.
Now, when I still use Foursquare. I love the tips. One of the great things about
Yes,
Foursquare is
I love
that
the tips.
the architecture, the way they label the experience, it's not on Yelp, it's reviews, and they can be infinite in length. And they're bitchy all the time. Yelp reviews are like, my coffee was like 20 minutes late, blah, 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 and we had this, this, and this, and 12 other things. On Foursquare, the term is a tip, and it's character delimited, so it's almost like a tweet. And so really all you can say is, you really need to have the pork rib sandwich. And those are really helpful tips.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, going through the side entrance, like, oh, ask for Tom, like, really, really, really helpful things. But those are short and they're tips, rather than like a bitch session about the restaurant. And so for me, I go to Foursquare for reviews, but now when I go to check in, they kick you off into Swarm, and then there's like, oh man, I have to push a button like twice. It's the worst,
really annoying.
right? And it's amazing how one extra click and one transition
Yeah.
just breaks the entire mental model that people have. Now Foursquare, if you read the blog posts, like they have very, very good strategic reasons for doing it. They may be right. It's a long play, and they chose to like kill their darlings before it died out. And maybe the two apps will be stronger separately, and we will all be wrong.
Maybe.
But right now, they definitely broke the experience for a lot of people, because I go there to look at tips, to know where something is, and also to check in. And they've separated out like a third of the things I do in one of those.
They got rid of the badges.
And they got rid of badges.
Yes.
Yeah, no, all these
That's
badges that I accumulated. I was Jet Setter level 7, guys. Where is that now? Where is that now? So yeah, what I want you guys to do is take your app, and now take a step back, right? Draw a system out for it. What's the secondary flow? What's a tertiary flow? Where's the login page? Can you draw a system map where you can find out what the sections of the system are, right? Zoom out a little bit and not sketch 3 screens. Sketch like 10 screens. How do they all fit together, right? Can you label the components of the system? Let me give you guys another 5 minutes for this. This is harder. Put your thinking caps on. So what I want you to think about, this is the last thing, and this is one of the most important things I think when anybody comes to me to talk about an app experience or something they're designing, is that you need to think about the 5 E's of experience design. These 5 E's are a very broad, very important mental model. You need to think about how you're going to entice somebody. They're not even in your system yet. You need to think about how somebody gets into the system. that's marketing, that's recommendations, that may be mobile versus web, all the different channels that somebody's going to come into your system from. Do you have something to add about that?
Yeah, I think that the other thing to think about Entice as well is beyond just downloading the app, it's like when the user is already, like let's say you already have Facebook on your phone or you already have WhatsApp, like how are you actually enticing the user to even open it in the first place? So is it that notification that pops up on your phone? That's the entice. And that's before they even open up the app. So there are two levels.
I remember I was on the subway and I watched these two young guys on the subway. They were both Android users, and this one guy was like, man, my phone just crashed. I lost all my shit, man. It sucks. This one was like, yo, you gotta use Drop Zone, man. It's the shit. Now he was talking about Dropbox. It was amazing. He used it, loved it, did not know the name of the app. But was showing his friend on his phone. He's like, yo, this is it. You just like sync it up, man. It just gets all your contacts, takes all your photos, puts it up in the the cloud and shit. And he was like, that's amazing. I actually saw the moment where word of mouth was happening, right? That's how somebody entered into the world of Dropbox. Now you need to think about what's the first thing somebody's going to see, like onboarding, right? How is somebody going to enter into the experience? How do you make sure that they're oriented to the experience? There's so many ways that you can help people enter into your experience. What does engagement look like for you? I think a lot of people think about the ideal state of the system. When people are engaged, there's going to be all these people, they're going to be using everything. What does it look like when people are babies in the system? How does it look like when they're teenagers and adults in the system? How do they grow up and become expert users versus beginning users? I think one of the really important things that is actually not on here is the idea of loops. How do you get people re-engaged in the system? That's part of extending somebody's relationship. People often don't think also about how people exit the system. We did a workshop with Acumen, I guess almost a year ago, and they were talking about the process of volunteers leaving, giving up, wanting to take a sabbatical. If you don't have a nice way for your users to peace out, to leave and make it okay to re-enter, if you actually pay attention to the exiting, it can change how people interact with your system, right? I use something called an exit intent pop-up on my website, so that when people move their mouse to the edge of the browser window, there's a pop-up that shows up and says, hey, sure you want to leave? Like, why don't you sign up for my email list? Here's a free download. That's my way of taking this moment where somebody's about to exit and giving them an option to stick around. Right? That works with 5% of the users. That's awesome. That's 5% of 50% that I would have lost completely. Right? So you need to consider the exiting, not just your top users, but the people who are going to leave. And then once people are in the system, you need to know, how can I extend my relationship with them? How do I keep them constantly engaged? What are the loops, those notifications, the email I send out to them if they haven't been using it for a week or a month? Start looking at the emails that companies are sending you that are trying to change your psychology. Find how these pop-ups and notification windows work to get people re-engaged and engaged in deeper parts of the system. If you can account for all of these 5 E's in your design of your system, you can begin to make sure that you have a total experience design and not just a partial experience design. So, so that's the, oh yeah, there we go. So these are the 5 things we talked about: focusing on your users, right? Knowing your users, and focus on their key needs relentlessly. Speaking users, so speaking your user's language and not jargon or acronyms. Key goals and flows, like knowing why they're there, not why you want them to be there. Mapping the systems, so mapping the whole system and connecting all the flows together. And knowing your funnel, making sure that you know the entire life cycle and experience that you're providing. So those are the 5 things. We have 2 minutes left for questions. You guys want to get something for lunch, we'll stay here and answer your questions as long as you like. That's pretty much all the things we had to talk about for the morning. This is when you would call.